the info. It's the man with the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the man with the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. We got the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info man. You can call him information info man. Kicking knowledge all over this nation.
Hey everybody, it's Information Man, and I know everybody is celebrating Thanksgiving today, this is the time of the seasons. So what I wanted to do here, I hope you enjoy the background here. You got the black family, the father, the mother, and the children. As you could see before I took a seat here, I'm going to be doing a presentation. And I hope you enjoy this presentation. I hope you get something out of this presentation as it relates to black people celebrating these holidays, particularly the issue around Thanksgiving and whether we as black people should be indulging in things like Thanksgiving, or at least have an understanding of the history of what it is that we may or may not be celebrating. So I hope you enjoy my presentation. I hope it opens up one's mind. And with that said, let's get right into the presentation. And I thank you again, everybody out there that's been supporting me. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share the video, and enjoy the presentation. Thank you. Let's get at it right now. Now, I know everybody is celebrating Thanksgiving. These are the holiday seasons. But we have to also examine what it is that we're celebrating. Now, I know that folks are with their family. We enjoy eating the sweet potato pie, the pecan pie, the macaroni and cheese, the turkey, the collard greens. So good, makes you want to slap somebody. Okay, now I understand that very much. This is very important. Information is very important as well. Information is power. And so I'm not going to negate or take away from the fact that this is a time of the year that it gives us the excuses that we need, and it gives us the opportunity that we need to converse with our family members, to see Uncle Ray Ray, JoJo, Aunt May, to fellowship with the family, to see your little niece, your cousins, to enjoy the sport events that will be on the television today or any day. It gives us a chance as black people to connect with each other. However, you've heard it before, we should always make every day a family day. We should make every day as important, not just wait for one day to emphasize family, because family is supposed to be every day. It's all encompassing. But I want to examine this. I really want to get into this situation as we look at Thanksgiving, the history, what its real origins is, where it really comes from, and how it impacts black people in the 21st century. We need to understand, because in America, we are culturally conditioned. And I think most of what we celebrate and what we do is based out of cultural norms or culture that dictates to us what we do. It's learned behavior by the dominant society that has sort of conditioned us to celebrate things sometimes without even thinking about what we're really celebrating, other than we think it's about our family. We think it's about having a good time, but not understanding the history of what it is that we may be celebrating or indulging in. So let me break a few things down. I hope that it can open up one's mind as it relates to this thing we call Thanksgiving. And the question is, why are African Americans or Native people, whatever we want to call ourselves, Moorish, African American, Black, Aborigine, all the different names and labels that we want to give ourselves, Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, Israelite, whatever you want to call yourself. The question at the end of the day, and I'm not saying that everyone celebrates these things, because some people do, some people don't. But the question is, in general, why are we as African Americans or black people in America, along with Native people, why do we celebrate what we call Thanksgiving? And we all every year like to say what we give thanks for. And so let me delve into this. Like I said, we're culturally conditioned. When you look at early childhood education, when you look at early childhood education and how that impacts us, let's be honest. In America, we are taught that America is a melting pot, okay, where people of all different races, creeds, sexes all come together to accept our differences. That is not true. We should celebrate our differences and then what we have in common. But a lot of time in America, which is a country that was built off of bloodshed, murder, terror, separating people by race, by creed, all these different things that we've been under. And black people, over 500 years of shackle slavery that we've gone through. So we definitely know that America, you should know, America is not a melting pot. It's more of what, when I was in college, I had a professor that said, America is more of a salad bowl. When you eat salad, what is it? You got tomatoes in there, you got the lettuce, you got the onions, if you like onions in your salad. You've got all these various things, cucumbers, and they're all thrown in there. But they don't all really blend together like as just one. They're all separate little vegetables and various things in there that just a variety of stuff. So in America, we got a lot of variety, but do we really have a melting pot in which people really work together, understand each other, and share? For the most part, we're a salad bowl because we're really segregated by our communities, by our economic status, our political status, our religious status. We're so separated, tribal, a lot of tribalism. So not really a melting pot per se. Now, let me give you a running definition, or the best I can, a definition of what a melting pot is. A melting pot can be defined as a country, a localized area, or a situation in which a cultural assimilation results in the blending of heritage and traditions of previous distant ethnic groups. Okay? Now, let me reinforce that with the definition of cultural assimilation, because that's really what we have in American society today. Okay? Cultural assimilation is the process by which members of an ethnic minority group lose cultural characteristics that distinguish them from the dominant cultural group, or take on the cultural characteristics of another group. So, for example, when you look at the Chinese, Japanese, you look at African Americans, anytime you take on the cultural norms and norways of whatever that dominant group is in the society, you some kind of way you lose who you are, because you're taking on the characteristics of other people. So black people in American society, a lot of the things that we do as it relates to these holidays like Thanksgiving, we're actually taking on the characteristics and the norms and the philosophy, which are European philosophies or European customs and culture, instead of taking on our own. So, for example, Christmas, that's taking on the customs of Europeans. We think because I'm Christian, so I'm doing, you're taking on the customs of someone else. When you look at something like Kwanzaa, which I like to celebrate, Kwanzaa is not a religious holiday. It's more of a cultural celebration of African American heritage. It was created by Dr. Karimba. It's a created holiday. It's not really a holiday. It's just a celebration of black people. Okay. But it speaks to our cultural norms. It speaks to who we are and our heritage, our family. Okay. It's not built on going out and buying gifts. If you do give someone a gift when you celebrate Kwanzaa, it's a gift that should be a gift of education, like a book, something that people can learn from. So that's why sometimes things like Kwanzaa, certain rites of passage programs in the community kind of speak to us. When you look at things like Thanksgiving, does it really speak to us as Black people, or is it really a holiday that speaks to the European? And therefore, as I read there, cultural assimilation is the process by which members of an ethnic minority group lose cultural characteristics that distinguish them from the dominant cultural group or take on the cultural characteristics of another group. So even though there are things that distinguish us from the dominant group or distinguish us from white America or from other ethnic groups in the society, Black people, even though there are things culturally that distinguish us from them, at times we can take on the behaviors and ways of other cultures. Okay. And so when we engage in things like celebrating certain holidays, Halloween, I did a video on that. Are we taking on a celebration that really speaks to who we are, what we are, and our heritage? Or are we taking on the cultural norms and appropriating the norms of other people? Because we know in Black people, everyone is appropriating our culture and making money off of it. But us, I mean, some of us are making money off of it in entertainment, but for the most part, are we, this is the question I have, are we as Black people making money off appropriating other people's culture? So when we celebrate Thanksgiving, or we celebrate any of these holidays that really have a European connection or heritage, are we making money off of their celebrations, or do they make money off of our celebrations? Let's just examine that and be honest about that. So these are some of the running definitions, melting pot, group of people, culture, assimilation, blending with other people or traditions. And so those are some of the things that we have to look at sometimes and examine. Okay. And I know people, are going to have their differences with points that I'm making here, but I wanted to examine this because I know people are having a good time. They're with their family. So some folks, when they celebrate Thanksgiving, they don't really think about this, or do they really care about it? It's just about, hey, I'm with my family, I'm eating. And we got to keep in mind, there's a lot of people out there who are not fortunate to be able to have the ability to eat a lot of food on this day that we celebrate things. And anytime we celebrate things like Thanksgiving, it's always followed by a lot of food, a lot of snacks, a lot of chips and dip, drinks, wine, soda pop, the chicken, the barbecue, the cranberry sauce, the macaroni, the potato salad. We're enjoying that, but there are other people out there that are really starving and don't have much. So it is kind of weird that we celebrate a holiday that's surrounded around food, in the overindulgent of food, when there's so many people in the world who don't have. And we're able to do this and feel comfortable with it because we call it a family time. While other people, and I know that there's a lot of people out there on Thanksgiving will go out and they will get involved in food banks. They will get involved in giving out turkeys and things of that nature. And I think that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Now I'm going to move on with the presentation, and I'm going to get into another area of this presentation. And this area is in the area. And let me just say this. Let me just break this down. When we look at minorities, in case of minorities in America, such as Black people or other groups, we often lose our sense of self. So when we take on other people's cultural norms, we can kind of lose our sense of self. So for example, so we can lose and often do lose our sense of self and culture. And we sometimes are compelled to follow the culture that America has established for us, especially Black people being in America. All our time in America, we have been trying to prove ourselves that we are good Americans, that we love America, and that America, the question is, we love America, but does America love us? And we have to always ask that question. So, we're compelled to follow these cultural norms of America that America has established. There are certain holidays that America recognizes, such as Cinco de Mayo, St. Patrick's Day. And by the way, a lot of people may not know this. Do you know that St. Patrick's Day, they're really celebrating a Black deity? So St. Patrick was a black man. A lot of people don't tell you that. And the colors are not actually green. The true colors of the celebration of St. Patrick are actually, if I'm not mistaken, are blue. And that St. Patrick was really a black man. So when a lot of Irish go out and they get drunk and they're celebrating St. Patrick, they're celebrating a black man. Do your history about St. Patrick's and who St. Patrick's was. He was a man of African origins. Black man. Oh, that's a little secret I want to tell you guys. So, do your research. So as I said, St. Patrick's Day, but both of these holidays are victims of cultural appropriation. When America dresses up as Mexicans or leprechauns, and you see this a lot, people celebrate Cinco de Mayo, they go out and get drunk. They'll wear these sort of stereotypical, the hats and the sombreros. They'll, behave in a certain way. I remember every year we have the Juneteenth festival. Black people are very familiar with this because this is the time when the first slaves were made aware that they were free. Thanks to good old Uncle Abe, Abraham Lincoln. We believe that Abraham Lincoln freed all the slaves when actually he did not. He freed only a few slaves as an economic embargo against the South. And if you read a book by Bell's Capitalism and Slavery, and Bell talks about how Abraham Lincoln said that he would do any and everything to keep the Union together, even if it meant freeing some slaves or not freeing anybody. So this whole ideology that Abraham Lincoln was down with black folks. And I know a lot of black Republicans like to pull that whole Abraham Lincoln, we're the party of Lincoln and we were the one that gave black folks. No. They gave only a few black people freedom. It was economic sanctions against the South because the South was making money off of free labor. But I digress here. Let me move forward in my point here is that, holidays these things are established. The holidays are established. We buy into it. We buy into these traditions. And my point that I was trying to make with Juneteenth is that, I remember when I was growing up, a lot of people would say, oh, that's just an excuse for black folks to go and get drunk. The same way they'll say it's an excuse for Mexican people to get drunk celebrating Cinco de Mayo. Okay. Now, let me move on here and just get into the fact that certain holidays that America recognizes, like I said, the Cinco de Mayo, St. Patrick's Day, there's a lot of cultural appropriation when Americans dress up as Mexicans, leprechauns, and excuses to drink. I made that statement already, to have a good time. Okay. Now, this relates to African American people. African Americans celebrate the 4th of July for the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. But slaves were not fed until 89 years later. So they weren't freed until 89 years later. So even though white people got their independence, which is another reason why I hate to hear black folks or just people in general say, well, the first black man, Christopher Attucks, he's the first black man to die in the Revolutionary War. And I say to you, so what? The Negro fought on the wrong side because that war against against Great Britain, which really was the Great Bank of Britain, their centralized bank, oppressing the European people that settled over here, oppressing them economically with taxes. And another piece of history is a lot of the Europeans that came to America were criminals. You had the indentured servants, okay, who came over to America to work off their prison sentence for whatever crime they did in Europe. So you had a lot of criminals who left Europe, who could not make it over there and came over here, which is why you can make the argument historically why Europeans were never really great towards Native Americans. They didn't treat black people very well because they already came from a lineage of criminality. And then what happened is the great bank or the great powers of Britain started to oppress them. And they said, ooh, we got to rise up against Great Britain and create our own government here. So that's why I said Christopher Attucks, he fought on the wrong side because while he was fighting, as I said it, black people were still not freed until another 89 years after the Independence Day, 1776, which is another reason why, and I did a video about this, another reason why we as black people in America should not celebrate another holiday. What is that called? The 4th of their lie, which we know as 4th of July. No more than we should celebrate Things Taken Day, which is what I call Thanksgiving, Things Taken Day. In my opinion, that's how I see it. Okay, so like I said, slaves were not freed until 89 years later. Many African Americans do not even acknowledge Juneteenth. Now, some do and some don't. Let me say that. Some do and some don't. Now, but it's important to understand that when it comes to black people, our history, okay, as black Americans, black people, whatever we want to call ourselves, okay, why celebrate a document that doesn't grant us any rights or privileges? So that's my question going back to 4th of July. And then when you look at Thanksgiving, why are we celebrating things that do not give us privileges or did not give us privileges? Okay, because okay, that's just a point. That's just something we need to think about. When we celebrate things in American society that have to do around independence and freedom, why are we celebrating it? And in the case of Thanksgiving, why are we celebrating a day that was sort of like a liberation for Europeans who so-called befriended the native people, which is actually not true? I've read some stuff. I've read some documents where they say when the Europeans came to America, they were doing a lot of horrible things. And it was the native people that were trying to civilize them, showing them how to grow the corn. That a lot of them were doing cannibalism as well. Cannibalism was going on as well. There's a lot of, I remember when I was in college, I took a class with Dr. Laura Hids, and she talked about there was documents of cannibalism going into Native American graves, and they had to kind of civilize them. So when the Pilgrims came over, they weren't any nice people. They weren't, like I said, a lot of them were people who came over from Europe, who were the criminals of Europe, and they were very grubby people, and they didn't come over here just being all nicey nice. There was a lot of horrible things that were happening. Okay, now let me move on. I talked about this Thanksgiving, or I call it a Things Taken Day. Thanksgiving in the African American community, it brings about huge gatherings. As I mentioned before, we like to get together with our family members, have a good time, because when you live in a stressful society, when you live day to day as a black person in America trying to make it, there's times when you got to blow off some steam. You got to, have a good time. And so I think black people, for the most part, we use these holidays as a way to escape from the stressors in our life. But I think it's still important to understand where these holidays come from. So let me, like I said, we use it as huge gatherings, important holidays. Now, it should be recognized that Thanksgiving as a holiday, our school textbooks have long fantasized about Thanksgiving Day as the Pilgrims and Indians' time to come together for great feast. Actually, in the year 1637, Massachusetts colony governor John Winthrop declared Thanksgiving to celebrate the safe return of the colonialist volunteers, the left for the war against the Pecan Indians. So there was a war. Okay, so the true Thanksgiving is wrapped up into a war that they were fighting against native people that were here during the time that they were colonizing this part of the world. So we think that it was Thanksgiving really comes out of Pilgrims and Native Americans, putting out the hand, olive branch of friendship. We're going to be friends. We're going to work together. That's not completely the truth. As I said here again, the actually in the year 1637, Massachusetts colonial governor John Winthrop declared Thanksgiving based on the fact that there were colonial soldiers returning. They were volunteers. They returned and left in a war against Native people here in what we call America. So the Thanksgiving was a celebration because they survived coming back from killing Native people, not being brotherly love. Okay, it's something we got to think about. Okay, against now this war resulted in the massacre of 700 Indians. Or I don't like using the word Indian because we know that the reason why Indians get the name Indian is because some idiot, I believe, what was it, Christopher Columbus or one of these idiots, thought that he was going to India. So when he got here, they said, oh, this is India and those are Indians. So that's where some of that comes from. But the reality is that the pre-quote Indian tribe, they killed 700 of these people. OK, instead of telling the real story of Thanksgiving, American history is kept covered in older form us to believe. They want to give us this belief that the Pilgrims and the Native people here had this beautiful, harmonious relationship. Okay, the colonialists got along with the Indians. Okay, they lived in perfect harmony with the Native people. Okay, that was not true. They were warring when they came here, just like they tried to oppress. They were oppressing us, folks. They were having wars. This is where Thanksgiving comes out of: warring, killing. Like I said, they were doing some horrific stuff. Okay, now remember the Trail of Tears? You know, you had President Andrew Jackson, if I'm not mistaken. He wanted to move. He moved all the Native people off the best part of the land to the southwest part of the country. They called it the Trail of Tears. Okay, the Supreme Court in this country at that point in time said that the Native people were their own nation, their own. But he didn't give a damn as president. He said, no, I'm moving them. So you got the Trail of Tears. That was going on. All this stuff, you know, that was happening. And we talking about, oh, Native people and Pilgrims are getting along. I mean, come on. There's so much history around this. OK, the Trail of Tears, the war, along with many other massacres of Native Americans, are barely even mentioned in schools and to us in general, folks. On top of that, for Thanksgiving and Halloween, many white Americans dress up as Indians and make fun. And they also, you know, they make fun. They stereotype, just like they did us. They did us with caricatures, black caricatures, okay? Which is nothing but a mockery of what Native people went through in America. And they do the same thing to us black people. They do mockery of us as well. Okay, let me go into I'm getting near the end of my presentation here, folks. But let me go into this part right here. Although as African Americans, we black people, Thanksgiving doesn't fully mean anything to us as a group of people. May mean something to us in terms of our family time to get together with our family, but it does not relate to the struggle. Thanksgiving, folks, I'm going to say this. Thanksgiving does not relate to the struggle and the massacres that we endured in early American history as black people in this country. The massacre of Native people can be related to not only the years of slavery that we endured, but also today the conspiracy to cover up the harsh details of not only the treatment of Native people, black people. We often see the same patterns today with the many deaths in the black community in the efforts to cover up facts and details. So this talks about when you have black men being shot by cops, when you have our communities being occupied, when you have the government plotting against us. I mean, you got the Memoranda 46 that I did a video on. It showed how they particularly want to keep black people from not having a connection with African people in the continent of Africa. That they continue to want to keep confusion and drugs and rampage going through our community, keeping us uninformed, keeping our schools poor and unfit and unwritten and run poorly. Because it's true, it has been a true study that there's the school to prison system. If you have poor schools, poor condition in schools, that's a pipeline to the industrial prison complex system. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, because we often see the same patterns today, as I said before, death in the black community, and we often to cover up the facts and details. Now, like I said, in school, if kids go to poor schools with poor educational opportunities, it's gonna mean 9 out of 10 times that child will have a higher chance of the prison industrial complex system. Now, in grade schools, we often, all of us have often been taught about the Jewish Holocaust and all the evil things that happened under Adolf Hitler, okay, during his reign. But we never really are taught about the true story of Thanksgiving, or even the internment camps that Americans were placed in, whether it be the Japanese were placed in internment camps. But we don't really talk about, now we know about the Japanese internment camps. We know about some of the things that have happened to Native people, but oftentimes there's not much that's talked about what happens to black people. And you notice that every time we talk about our experiences, everyone tells us to be quiet, shut up, stop complaining. Why are you complaining? Come on now, things are better for you. And there's always going to be a Negro, some conservative Negro out there, or someone out there who's going to tell us to be quiet. But I never hear any of these folks who tell black people to be quiet about talking about our history. You never hear them say or tell the Chinese, the Japanese, or Jewish people not to talk about their Holocaust. You never hear anyone telling Japanese people not to talk about what happened to them in terms of being put in encampments in America. And okay, no one tells any other group to shut up about the oppression in their history. But every time black people want to talk about our situations, we're told to be quiet. Isn't that interesting? I find that very interesting. So in America, we are forced in a lot of ways to learn the negative actions that take place in other cultures, but we never really own our own shit here in America as it relates to black people. We never want to own what has happened to black folks. But in general, America doesn't want to own its own history. They only want to paint the nice part, which is why they purposely painted this narrative that Thanksgiving is about the pilgrims and the native people getting along with each other, when it actually has everything to do, as I read, about the colonial army coming back safely after killing 700 native people when they were warring, during their colonization of American society. They had a war. 1637, the Massachusetts colonial governor John Winthrop declared Thanksgiving to celebrate the safe return of colonial volunteers, which were soldiers. I'm repeating that statement again because that is one of the things that Thanksgiving comes out of. Not this happy, let's hold hands, we shall overcome type narrative that a lot of us have been taught in school. Our kids are being taught that right now, if you have not taught them different. And while we're smacking on our turkey today and laughing and giggling and watching football games, we have to understand and absorb what the true history is. Okay? Now, it's important not to only understand the background of national holidays, but it's also to do personal research to find real facts on American history. So we should not be blinded by these holidays, in the fluff, in the advertisement, in all the things that they want to sort of get us to focus on. Always understand what you're celebrating, where it comes from, how it relates to you, black people, and why or why not you should not recognize these sort of holidays. I want to thank you for listening to my presentation. This is the Information Man. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, support what I'm doing. Everybody out there listening to me right now, I appreciate your support, and I know that you're going to enjoy this day or any day that you wake up and have life. And just keep this in mind. Any day that you wake up and you can eat food and you can celebrate with your family and friends, you should be thankful for it. Not just this damn day we call Thanksgiving. Every damn day you should be thankful for the ability to connect with friends, loved ones, and to be able to eat and take care of yourself. Because life is short and nothing is guaranteed. With that said, this is the Information Man to open up one's mind. Information is power. Yes, it is power. I want to thank you and take care of yourself wherever you are in the world, day, night, evening. Thank you for listening.
It's the man with the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the man with the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. It's the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info. We got the info. Whatever you wanna know, come join the man with the info show. It's the info man. You can call him information info man.